I think I'm taking two questions here, so might give you a bit of extra latitude if that's all right.
It's on the clock.
Sorry?
Yeah, you've got it on the clock.
Yeah, we have, yeah, thanks. Yeah. The second question is from Pauline Tully. I met with the Secretary of State most recently on the 2nd of November and the progress of the UK's Northern Ireland Troubles, Legacy and Reconciliation Bill was one of the topics discussed. In all of our discussions, I have been very frank in my view that this bill, as it stands, is not fit for purpose. It represents a clear move away from the Stormont House Agreement. There is near universal opposition to this bill in Northern Ireland, including from the 5 main political parties, those representing victims, their families and survivors, as well as a wide range of other groups. The Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission have expressed serious concern about the bill, as has the UK Parliament's own Joint Committee on Human Rights. The Government has serious doubts about whether this bill is compliant with the European Convention on Human Rights. We have raised our profound concerns about this bill directly with the British Government at official and political level and in the relevant multilateral fora, including the Council of Europe and most recently at the Universal Periodic Review of the UK by the UN Human Rights Council. Chief among those concerns is that the bill provides for the granting of immunity by the proposed Independent Commission for Reconciliation and Information Recovery for gross violations of human rights and the remarkably low threshold for the granting of this immunity. The proposed immunity has profoundly upset families, with many believing that this legislation would protect the perpetrators and denies victims a path to truth and justice, particularly when evidence may exist. The bill provides for the proposed Independent Commission to conduct reviews rather than investigations of legacy cases. The status of these reviews, the significant powers invested in the Commission and the Chief Commissioner, and the role of the Secretary of State raise questions of the independence and all remain matters for serious concern. Under the proposed legislation, all criminal investigations and inquests that are not at an advanced stage and civil actions would also cease. The Government will remain fully engaged on this issue. I have discussed the issue with political parties in Northern Ireland, and in my recent engagements with senior US politicians in Washington, DC. I also recently met with the Northern Ireland Commission for Victims and Survivors and members of Victims and Survivors Forum. The Secretary of State for Northern Ireland has indicated that he is open to addressing concerns raised about the bill and to increased engagement with all stakeholders. It was agreed at the British-Irish Intergovernmental Conference in October that officials would meet to discuss the main elements of concern. However, I have been clear that any amendments would need to be radical and fundamentally change the substance of this bill for it to meet our concerns. The Government is aware of calls for consideration of the initiation of an interstate case against the United Kingdom before the European Court of Human Rights in relation to this piece of legislation. Any future examination by the European Court of Human Rights as to whether this bill, if enacted, is compliant with the United Kingdom's obligation under the European Convention on Human Rights will depend on the precise terms of the legislation as enacted and the factual circumstances pertaining at the time. In this light, a decision as to the referral of an interstate case to the court by Ireland concerning the bill, which remains subject to amendment, is, in the Government's assessment, premature. The Government, however, continues to keep this matter under review. The Government's approach to legacy and reconciliation has always been that it should be a victim-centred approach, taking the Stormont House Agreement as its starting point, a process that was agreed by both governments and most political parties in Northern Ireland with the support of victims and survivors groups. Can I just finally say on this, and I'll be short in my final answer. I have had, I think, a constructive discussion with the new Secretary of State on this issue. I don't know whether it will be possible for us to come to an agreement in relation to amending and changing this legislation fundamentally. But what I would say is, on an issue as sensitive as legacy and the trauma and pain that it is linked to for so many thousands of families, this is something that the two governments, working with parties in Northern Ireland and with victims groups, should try and agree a common approach together on. unilateral action, moving ahead without the support of virtually anybody, in my view, is a real mistake by the British government if they choose to do it. But I do want to welcome the conversations I've had with Secretary of State Heaton Harris, who has shown a willingness to looking at possible change, and I hope that will be possible.